So I was looking at the trajectory of human survival recently, specifically the sheer span of how we've tried to fix our own biology, and it just forces you to realize how wild our timeline really is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around sometimes.
Right. Like, think about this for a second. 59,000 years ago, deep in this Siberian cave, you have a Neanderthal with a rotting molar. And someone actually performed a makeshift root canal on them.
Wow.
Yeah, an invasive dental procedure with, stone tools.
The sheer desperation of that moment is just, it's staggering to visualize, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, the ingenuity required to even attempt something like that with chipped flint.
Exactly. But then you look at where we are at this exact second. I mean, we have humanoids running entirely automated medicine labs.
Right.
We have pharmaceutical companies literally strapping molecules to rockets, shooting them into low Earth orbit just to grow drug crystals in microgravity. All because Earth's gravity gets in the way of the chemistry.
It's insane.
It is. It is this massive whiplash-inducing collision of, ancient biology and hyper-futuristic engineering.
Well, we're basically watching the fundamental operating system of the world being rewritten in real time right now. I mean, the leap from stone tools to orbital pharmaceuticals isn't just a straight line of progress. It's an exponential curve that is currently, well, it's going vertical.
It really is. Today's show is an inspiring celebration of impossible ideas and the minds brave enough to chase them down. Finding passengers bold enough to embark on our good ship's journey is harder than most people think. So drop a very humane thumbs up right now to send a signal flare to drifting knowledge pirates like yourself. We know they're out there. Let's bring them home. We're keeping it lighthearted as usual, but we promise to never skimp on the intelligence. Now let's kick off this voyage with today's new revelations.
And we really do have quite the stack of revelations to process today.
Oh, man, we really do. For those of you listening, this deep dive is completely custom-tailored for your curiosity. We are unpacking a massive dispatch today from Dr. Alex Wissner-Gross.
Specifically, his May 14, 2026 update from the innermost loop, right?
Exactly. And our mission today is to connect the dots across, artificial intelligence capabilities, orbital economics, physical robotics, and even global governance.
Which sounds like a lot, but they are all connected.
Yeah, we want to show you exactly how all these seemingly separate threads, from raw code to rockets to international tax law, are actually woven into the exact same fabric.
Because, I mean, to understand the robotics, you really must first understand the economics of the compute. And to understand the compute, you have to understand the geopolitics securing the hardware.
Right. The whole ecosystem is completely intertwined.
Exactly.
So we have to start at the bedrock, right? The engine that's driving every single other development on the board. The raw compounding speed of AI right now.
Yeah, because if you want to make sense of what is happening in the physical world today, you basically have to look at what is happening inside the server farms.
Right. And the dispatch notes that OpenAI is currently deep into internal testing for GPT 5.6, and they are gearing up to launch it next month.
Which is huge on its own.
It is. And simultaneously, Google is preparing to unveil a new Gemini model at their I/O conference. But the detail that really caught my eye here is the phrasing.
Oh, the Dreadnought analogy thing.
Yeah. The dispatch states Google's new Gemini lands roughly in the, quote, GPT 5.5 class, which falls well short of Anthropic's new model, Mythos.
Right. And what's fascinating here is, well, notice the terminology there. We are now talking about AI models in classes.
Like naval ships or something.
Exactly.
Oh.
Much like naval dreadnoughts or, weight division is professional boxing.
Yeah.
GPT 5.5 class. It indicates that the benchmarking has become highly standardized across the entire industry.
Even as the ceiling of capability just continues to push violently upward.
Right. And that ceiling is moving at an absolutely absurd velocity right now.
Yeah, the UK's AI Security Institute, the AISI, actually came out and confirmed that the capability doubling time has compressed to 4.5 months.
Which is just a staggering number.
It is. I want everyone listening to really let that sink in. A 4.5-month doubling time. I mean, okay, let's unpack this. A 4.5-month doubling time is like your phone upgrading its entire operating system and processing power before you've even had time to pick out a new wallpaper.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. Like if you run a small business, that means the enterprise software you buy in January is fundamentally a dinosaur by Thanksgiving. How do you even plan a capital expenditure budget around an asset that doubles in intelligence 3 times a year?
Well, the short answer is you almost can't. It fundamentally breaks human intuition.
Yeah, we aren't built for it.
No, we really aren't. I mean, our brains evolved on the African savanna to track linear threats, right? You take one step, you move 1 meter, you walk for an hour, you cover 3 miles.
Sure, simple addition.
Exactly. But compounding, exponential growth, a doubling every 4.5 months, means that in just over a year, these systems are 8 times more capable. In 2 years, they're over 30 times more capable.
It's wild. We just do not have the biological wiring to intuitively grasp that kind of velocity.
You don't. And the dispatch highlights a specific phrase regarding Anthropic's Mythos in GPT 5.5 that essentially acts as the thesis statement for the entire tech industry right now.
Oh, I know the one. No clear ceiling, only a token budget.
That is the phrase, yes. No clear ceiling, only a token budget.
Meaning what, exactly? Just that money equals intelligence now.
Basically, yes. Historically, software had architectural ceilings. Like if you wrote a terrible piece of code or built a flawed algorithm, you could throw all the supercomputers on the planet at it and it wouldn't get much smarter.
Right, it would just execute its own failure faster.
Exactly. But what the AISI and the Noture Labs are observing is that with these current transformer architectures, intelligence scales directly and linearly with compute.
Okay, so the only thing preventing the model from becoming smarter is literally just how many billions of dollars you are willing to spend on tokens to train it.
Yes. The bottleneck is no longer human ingenuity and algorithm design.
Yeah.
The bottleneck is pure capital.
Which naturally leads us to see what happens when you actually pour that capital into the machine.
Yeah.
Because the ASI doesn't just theorize about capability, right? They test it.
Right. Through their cyber ranges.
Exactly. And I think we should explain that. Think of a cyber range not as like a multiple choice quiz, but as a digital fortress. It's a complex, simulated environment filled with servers, honeypots, firewalls, and active defenses.
Right. And the AI is basically dropped in and told to find vulnerabilities, exploit them, and pivot through networks to achieve a specific objective.
All while actively avoiding detection by simulated security protocols. It's like a digital heist.
It really is.
And the dispatch reveals that Anthropic's Mythos preview just became the first model in history to clear both of the AISI's premier cyber ranges.
Which is a huge milestone.
Yeah, it solved one called the Last Ones in 6 out of 10 attempts. But the absolute jaw-dropper here is that it broke a range called Cooling Tower 3 times out of 10.
And for context here, for the listeners, Cooling Tower was previously unbroken by any machine or human testing protocol in that specific constrained environment.
Wow. Unbroken.
Completely.
Yeah.
GPT 5.5 only managed to clear the Last Ones 3 times out of 10, and it couldn't even make a single dent in Cooling Tower.
So what does breaking an unbroken cyber range actually prove?
Well, it means the model is demonstrating novel, dynamic problem solving in a highly adversarial space. It is not just regurgitating training data it memorized from GitHub.
Right, it's not just copy-pasting code.
No, it is actually reasoning its way through a locked door that it has never seen before in its life.
That's a little terrifying. So we have these models getting exponentially smarter because we are throwing oceans of compute at them. But the underlying methods, like the actual math, that's also being optimized, right?
Oh, absolutely. The efficiency gains are just as important as the raw power.
Because I was reading about this group called NOS Research in the Dispatch. They developed something called token superposition training.
Yes, that's a brilliant piece of work.
The Dispatch says it delivers a 2 to 3 times wall clock pre-training speedup. And here's the technical part. It does this at matched FLOPs by averaging contiguous bags of token embeddings.
Right, which sounds like quite a mouthful.
It sounds like dense jargon. I need you to translate this for a listener, honestly. Does token superposition just mean we are finding clever shortcuts, or is the actual math getting fundamentally smarter here?
Let's break down the jargon, because the underlying mechanism is incredibly elegant. First off, FLOPs, floating point operations per second, is simply a measure of the raw horsepower of the computer crunching the data.
Okay, so matched FLOPs means they didn't just go out and buy a faster computer.
Precisely. They achieve the massive speedup using the exact same amount of computing power.
So it's a pure efficiency gain in the software, not the hardware.
Yes. Now, for the token embeddings part, when an AI reads text, it doesn't read words the way you or I do. It breaks a sentence down into chunks called tokens.
Right, like syllables almost?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
And then it translates those tokens into embeddings, which are essentially long lists of numbers that map the semantic meaning of a concept in space.
Okay.
Traditionally, a model processes these tokens sequentially. It reads the, then it reads cat, then it reads sat. Processing them one by one like that is computationally very expensive.
It takes a lot of time and energy.
Exactly. So what No's research has done is figure out how to mathematically overlap or superpose these tokens in groups. They call them bags.
Oh, I see. So it's like trying to read a whole paragraph at a glance instead of word by word?
Broadly speaking, yes, that's a good way to look at it. It averages the numerical representations out in a highly specific mathematical way that allows the system to digest the concept simultaneously.
Without losing the actual meaning.
Right, without losing the intricate semantic meaning of the sentence, they literally cut the training time in half, or even by 2/3 in real-world time, without altering the physical architecture of the server farm at all.
That is wild. It is just pure efficiency extracted from the math itself.
It really is.
But, you can only optimize the math so much before you hit the absolute physical limits of the silicon that the math is running on.
Which is the other half of the equation, the hardware side.
Right. And that brings us to this fascinating comment in the dispatch from a reader named John Holman. He brings up a company called Cerebras and their technology, the WSE, or Wafer-Scale Engine.
Oh, the Cerebras chip is a marvel.
It sounds like it. He points out that Cerebras managed to completely decouple memory and compute, allowing them to run 2,000 tokens a second.
Which is just a blistering speed.
I mean, for comparison, you'd be lucky to get, 130 tokens a second on a traditional H100 cluster?
Exactly.
And Holman mentions that the training time for a massive 70 billion parameter model like Llama 3.1 dropped from an entire month down to a single day. A single day.
Holman's comment really highlights one of the most profound physical engineering breakthroughs of this entire decade. Because to understand why the WSC is so revolutionary, you really have to understand the historical bottleneck of traditional chip manufacturing.
Okay, walk us through it.
Normally, computer chips are etched onto a large silicon wafer, right? Which is roughly the size of a dinner plate.
Right, and then they take a little diamond saw and slice that wafer up into dozens or hundreds of individual tiny rectangular chips, like the ones in our phones.
Correct. And then you have to wire all those tiny chips together on a motherboard. But data takes time to travel.
Even at the speed of light, it's a delay.
Exactly. Moving data off one chip across a tiny copper wire on a motherboard and into the memory of another chip takes an absolute eternity in computing terms. It generates massive amounts of heat, requires immense power, and essentially creates a digital traffic jam.
So what did Cerebras do differently?
Well, Cerebras looked at this whole process and asked a seemingly absurd question. They basically said, what if we just don't cut the wafer?
Wait, they just left it as one giant dinner plate-sized chip?
Yes. The entire silicon wafer is one continuous massive engine.
That's huge.
It is. And because the data never has to leave the silicon to travel across a slow motherboard, the communication speed between the compute cores and the memory banks is nearly instantaneous. That is exactly how they physically decouple memory and compute to hit that staggering 2,000 tokens a second metric.
But Holman also specifically mentions that they had to engineer their way through something called the yield problem. What is that?
Ah, right. So if you are baking a single massive silicon chip and one microscopic speck of dust lands on it during the fabrication process, it creates a flaw.
Which ruins the chip.
Right. In the traditional method where you slice the wafer into hundreds of chips, you just throw away the one tiny broken slice and keep the rest. But if the whole wafer is your single chip, a single speck of dust could ruin millions of dollars in hardware.
Oh, wow. So you just lose the whole dinner plate.
Which is exactly why the rest of the industry thought Cerebras was crazy for trying this. The yield problem is basically the holy grail of semiconductor fabrication.
So how did they fix it?
They had to engineer a dynamic routing system. They built an architecture that essentially maps out the microscopic flaws on the wafer once it's made, and it programmatically routes the data around the broken bits.
Like a detour on a highway.
Exactly. It just ignores the dead zones and keeps the chip functioning as a unified whole. Condensing a month of compute into 24 hours isn't just a time saver. It changes the entire iteration cycle of artificial intelligence.
I mean, when you combine the 4.5-month doubling time, the math optimizations like token superposition, and the hardware leaps like the Cerebras wafer, the human engineers start to look very, very slow.
Humans are definitely the bottleneck now.
And the talent pool is recognizing this, right?
Yeah.
The dispatch notes the emergence of a stealth startup called Recursive Superintelligence.
Oh yeah, they are making massive waves.
They just raised $650 million at a jaw-dropping $4.65 billion valuation. And their roster is basically a who's who of the industry. Former research leads from OpenAI, DeepMind, Meta, Salesforce, and Uber.
It's an all-star team.
And their entire mission is focused on having AI conduct experiments to safely improve itself.
Right, because as we said, the humans are officially the bottleneck. I mean, if the hardware can train a model in a day instead of a month, human developers literally cannot type code, debate architecture, or run diagnostics fast enough to feed the beast.
We just type too slowly.
We do. Recursive superintelligence operates on the premise that the fastest path to artificial superintelligence, ASI, is basically removing the human from the loop entirely.
Okay, so if you can build a system capable of autonomously designing an experiment, writing its own code, testing its own architecture, and optimizing the results, you basically trigger an intelligence explosion.
Exactly. The system bootstrapped its own evolution.
Look, if intelligence is compounding at this breakneck pace, and the only limit is that token budget we talked about earlier, then the global economy has to fundamentally reprice the resources required to fuel it.
Oh, absolutely. The economics are shifting just as fast as the tech.
We have to look at the money here. We are moving from how the AI is built to what it actually costs, and more importantly, who is holding the purse strings.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we are basically witnessing the transition of compute from a simple corporate utility into a global fiat currency.
Now that is a massive claim, a global fiat currency. But, I mean, the numbers in the dispatch actually back it up.
They really do.
The dispatch casually notes that NVIDIA just cracked a $5.5 trillion market cap, which is a number so astronomical it almost loses its meaning to the average person.
It's hard to visualize a trillion of anything, let alone 5.5 trillion.
Exactly. But the real story is playing out on the enterprise side, because Anthropic just overtook OpenAI inside RAMP's customer base.
Right, capturing 34.4% compared to OpenAI's 32.3%.
And for those unfamiliar with it, RAMP is a major corporate card and spend management platform. So we aren't looking at what, like, college students are putting on their credit cards to write term papers. We are looking at where hard-nosed CFOs are authorizing massive corporate expenditures.
Right. And it is the ultimate leading indicator of enterprise adoption. Businesses do not switch their underlying AI infrastructure lightly at all. It requires massive integration efforts.
So the fact that Anthropic is pulling ahead on RAMP data signals what exactly?
It signals a major shift in how corporations are measuring the actual return on investment of intelligence.
Yeah.
They're figuring out the ROI.
And there's a point in the dispatch that I really want to linger on because it feels like a genuine historical turning point. Jackson Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, and his wife Lori have a foundation.
Right, the philanthropic side.
Yeah. And they just bought $108.3 million worth of compute from a company called CoreWeave, and they are donating that compute directly to universities and nonprofits.
Which is a brilliant move.
Let's unpack the psychology of that, though. For the last century, a billionaire philanthropist would write a check for $100 million to a university, and the university would use it to, I don't know, build a new library wing or hire researchers or buy lab equipment.
Right, a very traditional model.
But now the philanthropist isn't giving cash. They are donating pure processing power, GPU hours.
Well, think about what currency actually is. Currency is simply an agreed-upon medium of exchange that holds value. Historically, cash was just the middleman.
What do you mean?
Well, if you are a cutting-edge university research lab today, you don't actually want $100 million sitting in a bank account.
You want what the money can buy.
Exactly. You want the $100 million so you can try to secure priority access to a data center. The Huang Foundation is just eliminating the fiat middleman entirely. They are handing over the foundational raw material of the 21st century directly.
It's the equivalent of donating a fully operational oil refinery in 1910.
That is a perfect analogy, yes.
It completely changes the entire power dynamic. And the major AI labs clearly realize they need to control these refineries.
Oh, I know it.
I mean, Sam Altman is reportedly mulling a new AI compute company, majority owned by OpenAI, but structurally separate. They were nicknaming it Stargate Redux.
Right, because they know that whoever controls the data centers basically controls the geopolitical chessboard moving forward.
And Anthropic is mirroring this maturation on the revenue side, too. The dispatch details Anthropic's launch of a dedicated monthly programmatic usage credit for their paid plans.
Right, they're aggressively shifting away from flat consumer pricing.
And moving towards strict, as-you-go enterprise economics. Explain why that shift from flat rate to programmatic pricing is so crucial for a business using the software.
Okay, so if a business pays a flat $20 a month for an AI subscription, it acts like a black box on a ledger. The accounting department can't easily calculate the margin on a specific automated task.
Right, it's just a general monthly expense, like paying for the internet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if a business pays a fraction of a cent per token for Anthropic's API to execute, say, a specific sales outreach campaign, they can track exactly how many tokens were spent on that one task.
And compare it directly to the revenue generated by that exact campaign.
Yes. It transforms intelligence from a vague overhead expense into a raw, highly measurable input cost. It becomes just like tracking the cost of electricity or the price of steel on a manufacturing line.
But, as these enterprise efficiencies scale, the human workforce is really caught in the crossfire in a very visceral way here.
The labor friction is becoming very real.
Yeah, the dispatch details a deeply unsettling situation at Meta. Employees there are actively protesting the deployment of mouse tracking software on their work machines.
Right.
And this isn't just about making sure they aren't, browsing social media or slacking off. The software is allegedly drafting every single cursor twitch, every click, every hesitation and scroll to train the very AI models that will eventually replace them.
It's imitation learning at scale.
Right. So I have to ask, are we essentially demanding that the workforce lay the bricks for a building they will ultimately be locked out of?
It is honestly one of the most profound friction points in modern labor. Because, the original promise of automation was always that it would eliminate the dull, dirty, and dangerous physical jobs.
The factory work, the heavy lifting.
Exactly. But tracking a knowledge worker's cursor is a completely different paradigm. Like I said, it is called imitation learning. The AI isn't just learning how to open a spreadsheet. It's capturing the microscopic, intuitive decisions a human professional makes when navigating complex information.
The stuff you can't really write down in a manual.
Right. The slight hesitation before clicking a button, the exact sequence of opening tabs to verify a data point, that is context. The protest at Meta isn't merely a privacy dispute about bosses watching them work.
It's much deeper than that.
It is a fundamental labor dispute about the involuntary extraction of a worker's hard-earned professional intuition, just to fuel an algorithm designed to render that exact intuition obsolete.
That is a chilling way to frame it, but it honestly provides the perfect pivot for our next topic. Because if compute is the new currency, and digital intelligence is mapping human intuition, the immediate economic incentive is to take that intelligence out of the server rack and give it hands.
Oh, absolutely. AI is getting a body.
We have to look at the physical world.
The robotics sector is experiencing the exact same exponential compression as the software sector right now.
Yeah, the dispatch mentions a company called Unitree opening Unistor. They're calling it the world's first robot task motion app store.
Which is a wild concept.
It really is. You can do a one-tap install of Michael Jackson choreography, the Charleston, or Jeet Kune Do, which is Bruce Lee's martial art, directly onto their various robotic units, like the G1 or the H1.
Right.
Think about what this means for you, the listener. If you bought an iPhone back in 2008, you went to the App Store and downloaded a digital level that used the gyroscope, or maybe a flashlight app.
We all remember the flashlight apps.
Right. But 18 years later, in 2026, you are downloading Bruce Lee's actual mastery of physics into a walking metallic machine.
What we are witnessing here is the total abstraction of physical mastery. I mean, consider the human toll of learning a martial art.
Years of training.
Years of bruised knuckles, muscle memory repetition, trial and error, and the slow biological reinforcement of neural pathways in the brain.
Right.
Unistor basically treats all of that lifelong physical mastery as nothing more than a downloadable software package. Once an AI model has solved the physics of the movement within a digital simulation, a process called sim-to-real, that movement can be perfectly, instantly replicated across a million hardware platforms.
So you aren't just downloading a video of how to punch.
No, you are downloading the physical capability to execute the punch with absolute mathematical perfection.
And it goes far beyond novelty dances and martial arts, too. The robotics company Figure recently live-streamed a team of their humanoids running a full 8-hour shift on the Helix O2 line, sorting packages.
And that stream blew up.
It did. They had a peak of 300,000 concurrent viewers just sitting at their computers watching robots work a warehouse shift. There is a reader comment in the dispatch from a user named Tom that I think captures why this is so captivating to people.
Oh, the one about the boxes.
Yeah, he wrote, "Watching Figure 3 is my new favorite show. I love it when it flips the boxes. It really has to understand physics to do that so well."
And Tom's observation cuts straight to the core of why modern robotics is fundamentally different from the robots of, say, the 1990s.
How so?
Historically, if you wanted a robot arm in a car factory to flip a box, a human engineer had to hard code the exact measurements. Move X degrees, apply Y pressure, rotate Z degrees.
Right, very rigid instructions.
Exactly. And if the box was an inch wider than expected or slightly heavier on one side, the rigid, hard-coded robot would just drop it. It had zero capacity to adapt.
It was essentially blind to anything outside its exact script.
Yes. But Figure's humanoids operate on end-to-end neural networks. They aren't relying on rigid scripts at all. To flip a box smoothly, the AI has to intuitively grasp the box's center of mass, calculate the friction coefficient of its own synthetic fingertips in real time.
Wow, real-time friction calculation.
Right, and it has to adjust for the effects of gravity and predict the momentum required to rotate the object in midair. It is exhibiting an intuitive, generalized grasp of physics learned through millions of hours of simulation.
So the robot isn't following instructions. It is actively feeling and reacting to the physical world around it.
Exactly.
And while the physical humanoids are handling the boxes in the warehouse, the digital agents are quietly taking over the entire back office.
The white-collar automation.
Yeah. The dispatch highlights Anthropic's launch of Claude for small business. And this isn't just a chatbot you asked for, like dinner recipe ideas.
No, it's far more integrated.
It is a toggle install that plugs directly into the nerve center of a business. QuickBooks, PayPal, HubSpot, Canva, DocuSign, and the entire Google and Microsoft stacks.
It connects to everything.
Yeah, and it is designed to autonomously run payroll, close the monthly books, chase down unpaid invoices, and even execute complex sales campaigns.
The convergence of this physical and digital automation is basically creating a completely closed-loop economy.
I really want to push you on the implications of this, though. If I have a humanoid working an 8-hour shift in my physical warehouse, and I have Claude sitting in my accounting software actively tracking down a vendor who is late on an invoice and negotiating the payment, is the line between a software tool and a digital employee officially gone?
Well, I argue that the line is completely dissolved at this point.
Really?
Completely.
Yes, because the distinction lies in agency. A tool is inherently passive, right? A hammer just sits on a workbench waiting for a human hand to swing it. QuickBooks sits on a server waiting for a human accountant to input the ledger data.
Right. A tool needs an operator.
Exactly. An employee, however, is active. You give an employee an objective, and they navigate the friction reality to achieve it.
When Claude notices an unpaid invoice, it isn't just running a pre-programmed macro. It is reading the context of the email chain, realizing the vendor needs a gentle nudge rather than a legal threat, drafting a polite but firm follow-up, and then automatically updating the ledger once the payment actually clears. It demonstrates true agency.
And we are seeing that agency delegated by everyday consumers, too. The dispatch notes Amazon killed their conversational AI project Rufus and made Alexa for shopping the centerpiece.
Right, a huge pivot for them.
But it doesn't just answer questions anymore. It actually acts on the user's behalf, utilizing deep purchase history to make active decisions.
Because we are rapidly entering an economy of agents. Your digital agent will negotiate with Amazon's digital agent to optimize a purchase, while Claude negotiates with a vendor's accounting agent to settle an invoice.
It's agents all the way down.
It is. And the human is elevated to a purely supervisory role, managing the parameters of the agents rather than doing the actual manual work.
It's a complete reorganization of human labor, which honestly brings us to the ultimate stakes of all this.
The biology side.
Exactly. We've talked about code, we've talked about money, we've talked about warehouse logistics, but all of this technology is ultimately aimed at the most fundamental human endeavor: health, biology, and survival.
Which loops us perfectly back to our Neanderthal from the intro.
Yes, the 59,000-year-old Siberian dental patient.
Right.
So the dispatch highlights this Neanderthal molar discovered in a Siberian cave, and it shows clear evidence of an invasive dental procedure, essentially a prehistoric root canal performed 59,000 years ago.
It's just wild to think about.
It is. Think about the massive arc of that trajectory. 59,000 years ago, an early human is agonizing in a cave using a sharp stone to physically hack away infected biology.
Right.
And today, we are literally strapping complex molecules to rockets.
You're referring to the Varda Space Pharmaceuticals project here.
I am, and it sounds like absolute science fiction. Varda's president, Delian Asparuhov, made a stunning prediction in the dispatch. He predicts that 195 of the next 200 products commercially manufactured in space will be pharmaceuticals.
It's a huge bet on microgravity.
It is. Varda just announced a major research collaboration with United Therapeutics. They are sending small molecule drugs into low Earth orbit to grow novel crystals in microgravity, specifically targeting rare pulmonary diseases.
Right.
And then they ferry these finished crystals back home via a reentry capsule. Look, you have to walk me through the chemistry of this. Why go through the immense astronomical expense of a rocket launch? Does Earth's gravity really ruin a drug that much?
It really does.
Yeah.
It is pure fluid dynamics and chemistry at play here. When pharmaceutical companies manufacture small molecule drugs on Earth, they often need to grow them into crystalline structures inside these large vats of liquid solution.
Okay, like making raw candy.
Essentially, yes. But gravity creates a highly chaotic environment inside that vat. You experience sedimentation, where the heavier particles constantly sink to the bottom.
Right.
You also experience convection currents, where lighter, warmer liquids constantly rise to the top. All this microscopic turbulence is constantly crashing into the crystal as it tries to form.
Just battering it while it grows.
Exactly. It creates tiny imperfections, stress fractures, and irregularities in the crystal lattice.
So it makes the molecular structure kind of messy.
Very messy. The crystal is basically fighting against the crushing weight of the entire planet while trying to delicately assemble itself.
Wow, I never thought of it that way.
But when you launch that same vat of liquid into low Earth orbit, you enter microgravity. Sedimentation and convection virtually disappear. The liquid solution becomes perfectly, eerily still.
So there's no turbulence to mess up the structure.
Precisely. In that environment, the molecules can align themselves with absolute mathematical precision. You yield larger, purer, and entirely novel crystal structures that are literally physically impossible to synthesize on Earth.
And those perfect crystals make better drugs.
Yes, these structurally perfect crystals can make a drug significantly more effective, easier for the human body to absorb, or even vastly more stable at room temperature. Space is basically the ultimate sterile, gravity-free laboratory.
That is just incredible. And back down on Earth, the regular laboratories are getting their own radical overhaul, too.
Oh, the Tokyo lab.
Yeah, the dispatch reports that Tokyo's Institute of Science just opened the world's first fully automated medicine lab. The facility is staffed entirely by humanoids and robotic arms.
No humans at all.
None. They are targeting a workforce of 2,000 research bots by 2040 to fully automate cell culture, experimentation, and scientific discovery.
Which perfectly intersects with our earlier discussion about the figure humanoids, if you think about it.
How so?
Well, culturing cells and conducting chemical assays requires immense repetitive precision. Think about pipetting microscopic amounts of fluid into hundreds of tiny vials, all while maintaining a flawlessly sterile environment.
Right, one sneeze and the experiment is ruined.
Exactly. Humans are inherently flawed at this. We get tired, our hands develop microscopic tremors after hours of work, we accidentally breathe on a sample and introduce biological contaminants.
Where a robot doesn't.
A humanoid lab operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with zero degradation in precision and zero risk of biological contamination from a cough or a sneeze. The speed of medical discovery just scales exponentially when the friction of human fatigue is finally removed.
But you know, the dispatch introduces one more variable into the medical equation, and surprisingly, it is a bureaucratic one.
Yes, the CMS program.
Right. The U.S. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the CMS, just launched a program called Access. It's a 10-year payment model that radically shifts how healthcare is funded.
And is a long overdue shift.
Yeah, instead of paying a doctor for required check-ins and appointments, Access rewards measurable biological outcomes, like an actual sustained lowering of blood pressure. It covers chronic conditions like diabetes, hypertension, kidney disease, obesity, depression, and anxiety.
It's a massive policy change.
It is, but I have to be honest here. I look at this list of Marvel space drugs grown in microgravity, legions of robot scientists in Tokyo, and then I look at a Medicare payment policy. You're going to have to explain to me why a bureaucratic billing change is featured in this dispatch right alongside rockets and humanoids.
I get why it seems out of place, but this raises an important point. Because the bureaucratic billing change represents the actual real-world realization of all that technology in the daily life of a normal citizen.
Really?
The Access model might genuinely be the most impactful immediate revolution for everyday human health on this entire list.
Come on, more impactful than orbital microgravity crystals.
In the short term, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because for the last 59,000 years, from that Siberian cave to the modern hospital, Room medicine has fundamentally been a fee-for-service industry.
Meaning you pay for the visit.
You pay for the attempt. You, as the
Yeah.
patient, pay for the consultation, the physical check-in, the blood test, the procedure. If the treatment fails, you don't get your money back, right? You just pay for another check-in.
Right, the doctor gets paid either way.
The financial incentive for the medical system is volume of service, not necessarily the permanence of the cure. The ACS model completely inverts that paradigm. The government is now paying for the actual biological result.
But why wait until now to do this? I mean, why couldn't they do outcome-based pricing 10 or 20 years ago?
Because the risk to the medical provider was simply too high. They couldn't guarantee what a patient did at home between check-ins. If they only get paid if your blood pressure goes down, but you go home and eat fast food for a month, the doctor goes bankrupt.
Ah, I see. They had no way to monitor the patient.
Exactly. But look at what we've discussed today. When you have compounding AI models that can instantly analyze vast amounts of biometric data from wearable devices, monitoring a patient's vitals 24/7.
Oh, right.
And when you have digital agents like Claude, capable of autonomously following up with patients daily to ensure medication adherence, well, the cost of diagnosis and monitoring drops to near zero.
The AI does all the heavy lifting of keeping the patient on track.
Exactly. The medical system can finally afford to guarantee a result like lowered blood pressure because they have continuous AI-driven data to proactively manage that patient's health in real time without forcing the patient to physically drive to a clinic for a visual inspection. The technology finally allows the financial incentive to perfectly align with human health.
That makes so much sense when you put it like that. Okay, so we've mapped out the raw compounding speed of the algorithms. We've seen compute replace fiat currency as the primary store of value. We've watched humanoids download martial arts, and we've sent pharmaceutical manufacturing into orbit.
It's quite the list.
It is. But a world shifting this violently requires a completely new set of rules. We have to conclude by looking at the geopolitical chessboard, because the people holding the levers of sovereign power are acutely aware of what is happening right now.
The governance of intelligence is absolutely the defining geopolitical issue of the decade.
And to prove that, let me share some staggering statistics from the dispatch. Right now, 25% of Washington, D.C.'s 13,000 federal lobbyists are working on AI issues.
That is a massive percentage.
It's up from just 11% in 2023. 1 in 4 lobbyists in the Capitol are knocking on congressional doors about algorithms. It's like the California gold rush, but instead of selling pickaxes, everyone is lobbying for algorithmic supremacy, export controls, and compute allocations.
The sheer scale of that human capital shifting toward a single sector is highly revealing. It really reflects the sobering realization that AI is no longer just a niche technology issue for Silicon Valley.
Right.
It is now the bedrock of national security, copyright law, labor economics, and global commerce all simultaneously.
And the friction is already spilling over international borders, too. The dispatch notes that Poland is aggressively pushing a 3% digital services tax aimed squarely at U.S. tech giants.
Right, the new tax policy.
Yeah, it applies to companies with over $1.1 billion in global revenue that report at least $6.9 million in Poland. And crucially, the dispatch reports that Poland is brushing aside U.S. diplomatic threats over this tax. Now, keeping our analysis strictly to the economic mechanics of this, what does this tax represent in the broader ecosystem?
It is essentially a textbook assertion of digital sovereignty.
Digital sovereignty.
Right. As intelligence becomes a fundamental utility like water or electricity, but it's provided almost entirely by foreign multinational tech giants, sovereign nations are grappling with how to capture the economic value generated within their own borders.
Because right now it just flows back to the U.S.
Exactly. Poland's 3% tax is a structural mechanism. They recognize that foreign algorithms are extracting massive value and data from the Polish population. The tax ensures that a fraction of that extracted capital is forcefully retained locally rather than being entirely siphoned back to data centers in California.
Which naturally accelerates the conversation about how we govern this globally before it just fractures into 1,000 regional tax war.
Nobody wants.
No.
Oh.
And the dispatch mentions that OpenAI's Chris Lehane has floated the concept of a global AI governance body. He suggested modeling it on the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Nuclear watchdog.
Yeah. It would theoretically be a U.S.-led coalition, but it would include China. Now, again, looking purely at the architecture of this proposal, I have genuine doubts here.
What's the sticking point for you?
Well, the IAEA is a framework built in the 20th century to manage nuclear energy and prevent nuclear weapons proliferation. Is an agency designed to track physical radioactive plutonium really the right blueprint for governing lines of code that run on a server?
It is an unprecedented governance challenge, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And comparing it to the IAEA highlights both the strengths and the fatal flaws of the analogy.
Walk us through both sides.
Well, the IAEA was constructed on the fundamental premise that fissile material, highly enriched uranium, weapons-grade plutonium, is a heavy, radioactive, intensely physical resource. You can send inspectors to physically count the centrifuges. You can track the supply chain of the raw ore.
You can see it on a satellite usually.
Right. The proposition from OpenAI is to compute specifically these massive, multi-billion-dollar clusters of GPUs as the 21st century equivalent of fissile material.
And that part makes sense on the front end, right? Because you can't train artificial superintelligence on a MacBook in a coffee shop. You need a data center the size of an aircraft carrier.
Precisely. The data centers are massively physical. They require dedicated power plants, immense cooling infrastructure, and global supply chains for the silicon wafers. Structurally, a global governance body could theoretically monitor the hardware creation and power draw, just like they monitor nuclear reactors.
Okay, so where does the analogy fall apart?
Where the IAEA analogy completely collapses is post-production. Because once a nuclear core is enriched, it remains a physical, highly dangerous object.
You can't just email a nuke.
Exactly. But once an AI model finishes training on that massive hardware cluster, the resulting intelligence, the matrix of weights, can be compressed and copied onto a commercial thumb drive. You cannot copy-paste a nuclear warhead.
Right.
So the IAEA model might work for monitoring the creation of intelligence, because the servers are big, but it faces severe, perhaps insurmountable limitations regarding the proliferation of the intelligence once it exists in software form.
And the diplomatic dance required to even attempt this governance is incredibly delicate. The dispatch points out a highly symbolic moment recently. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, ultimately joined the U.S. president's delegation to China and sat in on the meeting with Xi Jinping.
Right.
But only after the media loudly noticed he was initially missing from the roster.
It underscores a stark new reality in global politics. The leaders of these major computing infrastructure companies are no longer just tech CEOs.
They're essentially diplomats.
They're operating as quasi-diplomats. Their corporate allocation decisions directly dictate the sovereign capabilities of nation-states now.
Which brings us to the concluding maxim of Dr. Wissner-Gross's dispatch. It's a brilliant, slightly terrifying update to Theodore Roosevelt's famous foreign policy proverb.
Speak softly and carry a big GPU.
Speak softly and carry a big GPU.
Roosevelt's original quote, speak softly and carry a big stick, was all about projecting overwhelming military naval power to ensure diplomatic compliance.
The Great White Fleet.
Exactly. But if we synthesize every single thread we've unpacked today, the 4.5-month doubling times, the autonomous humanoids flipping boxes, the microgravity medical breakthroughs, the shift to compute as currency.
It all comes back to the same thing.
The underlying foundation of all of it is computing power. Nations are realizing that in the 21st century, raw computing power is synonymous with sovereign power.
So you don't need a navy if you have the servers.
You do not necessarily need to project kinetic military force if you outright own the digital intelligence that drives global commerce, logistics, and scientific discovery. The big GPU is the ultimate unassailable geopolitical leverage today.
It really is. It is the leverage to rewrite the future entirely. And, as I was scrolling through the very bottom of the dispatch, looking past all the main points we just discussed, there are some fringe academic discussions listed down there that just completely blew my mind.
The really bleeding edge stuff.
Yeah. They mention upcoming essays titled The First Multi-Behavior Brain Upload and The First Open Source Agentic AI Physicist. And it leaves me with this final thought, something for you, the listener, to really mull over tonight. If we now have an open source AI acting as an autonomous physicist, capable of doing end-to-end research without a human in the loop, how long until the AI invents entirely new laws of physics?
It's a profound question.
Right. Laws that allow it to bypass the very computing bottlenecks, the silicon wafers and power grids that we just spent the last hour discussing. What happens when the machine successfully rewrites the rules of the physical world it was literally born into? It's a wild, thrilling thought to leave you with.
It is the ultimate recursive loop, the creation defining the parameters of its own reality.
The outro music is by Rainbow, our Resident 6 Android girl band from near future Bhavet, Cambodia. They are the undisputed baddest band in the universe, and today's song is called Kali's Embrace. All finished songs are performed live using the Abacus platform by the band's creator, Human Performance in the Age of AI, reclaiming your humanity from the algorithm. Be sure to share the playlist with someone who has the mental bandwidth to absorb these provocative ideas. Links are in the description below. Enjoy the music. Thanks for tuning in.
I kneel before the sacred earth, each breath a dance with death and breath. The incense lends my prayers rise as Kali's presence fills the skies. Through bones and ash I find my way until the dark transforms again. Time, hear my call in this graveyard where spirits crawl. Yours is down, your fear sets me free. Come on.